What's going on, good people? It's Big Matt from the Matt and Todd Show. You're in for a treat here. We got another locker room reaction with Joel Klatt. This one's going to be about his top five. We're going to talk about that a little bit and kind of where he thinks that teams will be ranked. And I'm going to tell you my opinion on what he's got there for a top five. And then he goes into this argument about teams playing on the road and how much harder it is, like somewhere else for everybody else to play, except I guess for the SEC. Like it's not hard for them to play on the road. I don't understand what he's talking about. He does these double standard things. He says one thing, but then he just totally contradicts himself. So let's just get right into it and see what he's talking about here. All right, thank you guys for stopping by, and I do appreciate it.
First, I wanted to talk about my new top five because I tweeted it out on Saturday night, and USC hadn't beaten Arizona State yet. And so I was like, well, listen, I know what my top five is. I just wanted to get it out there because I know it was different. And my top five changed dramatically, in part because of what we have seen over the last couple of weeks. So let's get started. My new top five. Let's get started with number one, Ohio State.
Stroud under center. Defensive line adjusts. Stroud hands Mayan Williams, and he'll get into the end zone for his third TD of the day. Mayan Williams. Ohio State punches it in for one more score.
All right, so everyone's up in arms, down in the South over me putting Ohio State number one. But this was what it came down to, folks. I had two distinct tiers in my top five in my mind, and I'm going to walk you through the exact philosophy of why each team landed where they did in this top five. Ohio State was number one, and the only other team in the discussion, in my own discussion with myself, was Alabama. So those were my top two teams, and I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I want to rank these two teams? Well, you've got to parse them out. And here's what it ultimately came down to for me was the fact that Alabama is a great team. And by all the metrics and the analysis, I was going to put them at number one. Alabama was going to be my new number one team. But the problem is that there were two things getting in the way of that. The first being the fact that Ohio State has shown some serious depth and defense, the two Ds for Ohio State, that I think right now are as impressive as we've seen across the board. So they haven't really had their healthy weapons on offense, and they're showing tremendous depth.
But the game against Notre Dame, how's some of that depth working out? Because we've found out that, Notre Dame being ranked at the time, yes, they were good. They were going to be five. And we found out that they're not really that good. So, Furman, I don't know about that, Joel.
Mayan Williams, who you heard in that clip, goes off last week. And granted, it was a win over Rutgers. So, I mean, does it really matter how well they played? Well, some think no, but I think it does because there were guys that they weren't planning on relying on doing this. Mayan Williams being one of them from the running back position. They also have not really had a healthy Jackson Smith and Jigba, who really is their best offensive player outside of their quarterback, and they haven't had him all year long. And it hasn't stopped them from being the best offense in the country. So they show their depth. But it's also their defense. Their defense right now is 14th in the country in scoring and 10th in total defense.
And those stats are true. And we could go back and look at who they've played, from the Furmans and the other teams. And we could just go real easily right over here. OHIO, Ohio State football. They'll have Michigan State coming up this weekend, and they've played Rutgers. Notre Dame, they played them on the 3rd, not really good. Arkansas State, Toledo, and Wisconsin, which they just fired their coach, so it must not be real great. So let's rock on here.
They're playing really well on that side of the ball. A drastic improvement from what we saw over the last couple of years, in which years that the defense was their clear Achilles heel. It was their clear weakness. So depth and defense has made them a very balanced team. Now, that doesn't mean Alabama is not a balanced team. So, Joel, what you just told me that by every metric, yeah, so it couldn't just be the depth and the defense for Ohio State. And you're right. It wasn't just the depth and the defense, but that balance allowed me to look at this situation and say, okay, if these teams played this week, because remember, this is a poll for this week, all right? This is not a rolling scale like the official World Golf Rankings, where I'm going to go back 2 years and say your body of work over an entire 2-year period. No. This is a snapshot in time this week. What are you this week?
And I agree. I like that. I'm the same way. When I do my top 10, I do it for this week and the games that they've played the day before. When we do our show Sunday, I'll do a ranking Sunday. And you can go back and see, hey, when Bama and Texas played, I had them at 3. I mean, they definitely were number 1. They could have been probably 4, but, like Michigan had played Toledo, I think, or something. So, Michigan's just hanging around there by default. We've seen what happened to them last year. They come down here and they just got completely obliterated. And I don't want to hear them building them up of what they're going to do, and they're going to be in the playoffs. So, I mean, if you're just going to do this for top 4, these are the playoff teams. Ohio State, Clemson. Ohio State beats Clemson. Bama and Michigan. Bama beats Michigan. So, one's going to play 2, just like the old BCS would have had it. So, it's all just kind of moot. But, when they're cotton in the field, I like making a top 10. So, that's just me. Let's carry on here.
It's a snapshot in time this week. What are you this week? And quite frankly, I think Ohio State would beat Alabama this week. Therefore, they got the number 1 spot because Bryce Young and his shoulder, we don't know how healthy he is. Now, there's optimism around his shoulder, an AC joint sprain, which, by the way, I've had.
And we can assume a lot of things. And, probably righteously, you would say that Ohio State would be favored because how could Alabama beat them with their second-team quarterback? You probably wouldn't assume that, but let's not forget how good that Alabama defense is. So if they could stop Ohio State to 20, could this other Jalen 2, could he come in and score 21 with that run game and how they've played, this week? And that's against Arkansas. Now, he had some good lanes to run through. Gibbs had some good runs. I don't know. So, I mean,
in both of my shoulders, I had one totally blown out, one more of a mild sprain, which it appears to be for Bryce Young. I'm sure he can play through it, but I'm sure it's going to be painful. And I think that that's a health issue that would prevent Alabama from beating an Ohio State. We already saw Alabama struggle with a team that could line up on offense with really talented players and get after them, and that was Texas. That first quarter, Alabama was in trouble down in Austin because Quinn Ewers could throw it around. They had speed on the outside. Remember, Texas had 5 5-star players starting just on the offensive side of the ball.
Yes, I agree. If Quinn Ewers plays that game, gosh, we talked about it on our show, Sunday. I don't know how that game turns out, man, because Ewers was throwing that thing around like a hot potato down here at the restaurant. So, yeah, I can't necessarily disagree with that.
So they could line up and really get after it, even against Alabama's great defense. And that offense, as talented as they are for Texas, they're not close to, 1, as talented, 2, as good as what that Ohio State offense is. So if they played this week, I would pick Ohio State. Therefore, Ohio State was my number 1 team this week. This is a snapshot, folks. It's October 2nd. Who's the number 1 team in the country this week? It's the Ohio State Buckeyes. And for that reason, I put Ohio State number 1 and Alabama number 2. It had everything to do with Bryce Young's shoulder. If Bryce Young is healthy, I put Alabama number 1 because I would say Alabama would beat Ohio State in that world. But not right now. So Ohio State goes in there, and they're my number 1 team in the country this week. This snapshot, Alabama is number 2. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, where the hell is Georgia, Joel? Because weren't you talking about last week that it's clearly a 3-team separation? Yes, but they were not in my top tier discussion. They were not in my top tier deliberation. They were in my second tier deliberation. Second tier. Important and very important. So where did Georgia end up?
And you know what? It's going to be really hard next week, too. And it's going to be really hard the next week. And it's going to be really hard 2 weeks after that. It just doesn't change.
Now, notice what he just said right there. He said it was really hard. It's hard to travel. It's hard to get a team on the road, get them all together, and to travel. It is. No matter what you're playing or what level you're playing at, it is. And I know traveling to Missouri, it shouldn't have been that close. Well, yeah, we know K-State, beat Missouri pretty bad. But I don't know that Georgia is just playing. Number one, I don't think they're really inspired to play Missouri. I think it's like the big kid on the playground. He just kind of gets tired of bullying everybody around, and it's just easy taking everybody's lunch money because there's no doubt the five-star talent that is at Georgia. There's no doubt. The NFL proves it. So it's not an SEC bias thing. Or if you want to watch the video at the end of this one, you can click and watch about our ideas about the troubles that Georgia has. Is Munkin trying to win Staquinus Bennett the Heisman Trophy? I don't know. Either just not playing inspired, they better change that, or they're just trying to get Bennett a lot of passing yards and pad his stats because they know that the season is fixing to get into a very tricky part, and they're just trying this stuff out and giving some stats.
It's going to be really hard the next week. And it's going to be really hard 2 weeks after that. It just doesn't change. And you guys may think it's going to be easy at some point, but I promise you, it's going to be really hard in the SEC every week.
Yeah, we get it. And I mean, this is always the narrative. Oh, it's so hard. It's so hard to beat Missouri, who got absolutely crushed by Kansas State by 28 points. But it's so hard for Georgia to go into Missouri and dominate that team. It was so hard. Kent State's not in the SEC, and you were at home. So why were you in a 10-point game in the fourth quarter with Kent State?
I think, again, it's just they're not inspired to play these teams. And I think that Missouri-Kansas State game was at Kansas State. So the road argument about being tough to travel and win, that don't go along with your argument there, Joel.
By the way, is it easier to win in other conferences on the road? Was it easy for Michigan to go into Iowa City and win in Kinnick when Iowa has beaten 4 of the last 5 top 5 teams that they faced in that home stadium? I'm pretty sure that's a better track record at home.
I can't remember Iowa beating Alabama's, Georgia's, or Clemson's at home. Now, if we want to use that, Michigan maybe at a time, I don't know what he's really kind of alluding to, because the talent there is not the same as it is here. Again, we'll reverberate to this. The talent here in the South is better. So the gap between Michigan and Tulane is a lot different than the gap between talent and Georgia and Missouri. I would say that do we think that Missouri could beat Iowa? I don't think so. But the talent level is different. So traveling on the road and what you're trying to acclimate is what? I mean, he says one thing, but then he goes back and says something else. So
top 5 teams that they faced in that home stadium? I'm pretty sure that's a better track record at home than Missouri. This notion that this conference has some sort of mysterious power where it's harder to win on the road in the SEC than it is at other places is false.
Well, I disagree because the talent is better. The talent's better down here, period. There's better players at Missouri than at most of the other teams playing up north. Let's see if Missouri could line up and play with Wisconsin. I mean, he always makes these same points, and there's just nothing behind it. He's trying to back it up with one thing, one steady thing to say this is it. But let's not take into the whole account of the entire situation of what's really going on. Because if we're going to talk about teams and how good they are, then you're just going to show their record. Well, let's see how many kids come out of college from the SEC and go to the NFL. Go look those stats up on your own, and you'll know.
To win on the road in the SEC than it is at other places is false. It's false. That's bias, that's narrative, and don't buy it. You know where it's hard to win? At really good teams.
Yeah. It's really hard to win at really good teams. So what really good teams are you laying out here? You're trying to lay out this argument, this case, that Michigan has played. Who? What real teams have they played? Let's just look out here. Michigan Wolverine football. 27-14 over Iowa. And they'll be playing Indiana this weekend. Connecticut. Hawaii, Maryland, and they have Penn State in 2 weeks. It kind of looks like Penn State is about the only ranked team that they're going to play. And Penn State is just kind of up there by default this week because of some teams kind of moving around and them being able to move up and those type of things. So I don't know where he's heading with this because it just don't make.
It's hard to win at
sense.
Clemson, but they're not in the SEC, Joel. Yeah, but they've won 37 straight. It was tough for Clemson to win at Wake Forest on the road. League road games are tough.
Now, let's go back because he's doing it again. I'm just trying to tell you this guy's insane sometimes. Listen to what he just said.
It was tough for Clemson to win at Wake Forest on the road. League road games are tough.
Wait a minute. Hold on just a minute. Wait a minute. So you're telling me that it's hard to play league road games? Except Georgia can't play tough league road games? Joel, bro.
Across the board. Ask Iowa State, who rolled into the booth and got beat by Kansas. You bet it. You bet it. I cannot stand this narrative that all of a sudden in that conference it's harder to win on the road. Missouri's no good.
Yeah, we know. And neither is Hawaii. I don't think Maryland's good. Connecticut? Indiana? Their quarterback's at Washington. What are you talking about, bro? That don't make any sense. What you're saying is just absolutely asinine, ass 10 and 11. Dude, you don't make any sense.
This narrative that all of a sudden in that conference it's harder to win on the road.
It's not all of a sudden. It's been that way. Go back and look, see who's got the rings, bro.
Missouri's no good. They got housed by Kansas State by 28 points.
Where?
28. Granted, it wasn't at Missouri.
Oh, whoa. So now, wait a minute. So they go on the road and get beat. And then we're going to talk about how tough it is to play. It's to play road games. It's just, it shouldn't be hard for Georgia to go play road, but it should be tough for other conferences. Clemson to travel to Pitt and play. Who's ACC? What teams have they got? Lay it out for me, bro. Florida State? Yeah, they're better now than they have been in a while. Congrats. Miami, Coach Cristobal, we thought they was rolling right along, and it's not doing so well.
28. Granted, it wasn't at Missouri,
Whoa.
but still, 28?
But still, you're contradicting yourself.
And all of a sudden, Kirby Smart's going to go out there and, quite frankly, lobby everyone around the country by saying, like, oh, don't think down on us. It's really hard.
Now you're just being dramatic. You're trying to play it up, like trying to play some kind of different flip-flop side of this, and that's just a bad argument. It's a bad case. It's just not a good look for you there, Joel. It's just not.
It's really hard. Michigan's win at Iowa was much better than Georgia's win at Missouri.
I agree. I can't argue with that. But I don't think they're trying to get one of their two quarterback systems to try to win a Heisman. And something else that we need to throw in the mix before we get off here. Guys, do you understand, and some of you do and some of you don't, if some of you don't have a team that's been relevant in the past many, many years, do you know what it's like to be able to go out there and try to play these other teams? You get their best shot. When Bama plays anybody else, they want to be that team that beats Bama. And with Georgia being the returning national champions, everybody wants to be that team that can go out there and that can beat Georgia. That's what they want. They want to try to make a name, make a splash. So you get everybody's best shot. It's just ridiculous to think otherwise. I mean, it just don't make any sense. Why else would it be? You're taking into effect Michigan to play Iowa. It's not the Super Bowl for them. It's not. It's just another game. But if this team can beat Georgia, or if this team could beat Alabama, it is.
Not even close. So I started my second tier by putting Georgia number 5. Because you can't play like this in a snapshot poll. Remember, this is October 22nd. October 2nd. This is a snapshot. You cannot play the way that they've played over the last 2 weeks, regardless of what they did week 1, and stay at number 1 or in the top tier, frankly, which is why they fell out of the top tier and landed at the bottom of my second tier. Kent State got beat by OU by 30 and by Washington by 25. And
are they going to go up there and try to beat Ohio State? Yes. I'm telling you, dude, they didn't win the national championship last year. Maybe you don't remember. Maybe you've been drinking. I don't know what's going on with you. National champs from returning, coming to play the next season and get everybody's best shot. That's just the way it is. I know your team. You don't understand that. You don't root for a team that does. And it just don't melt in your brain. But that's how it is.
And Kent State was in a 10-point game with Georgia in Athens early in the fourth quarter. Georgia ends up beating them by 17. Okay, maybe you can explain that away. It's like, hey, they just didn't play great that day. All right. You know what? I'll buy that. I'll buy that. And guess what? I did buy that. And in my snapshot last week, it didn't affect Georgia. But then they rolled out there and didn't have a lead against Missouri until the 4-minute mark of the fourth quarter. So don't all of a sudden start throwing around this garbage. Like, it's tougher to win at Missouri than it is in other places. It's not tougher to win at Missouri than it is at Wake Forest or.
Okay. So now the talent levels at Wake Forest are as good as a mid-level SEC team. The talent level is completely different. It's just completely different.
At Iowa, which is exactly what the other two teams in my tier 2 did over the last couple of weeks. So how did Michigan and Clemson wind up at 3 and 4? Well, let's start with Michigan. Michigan, I'm just thoroughly impressed with their balance. There were 2 questions coming into the season about Michigan. One was about their quarterback and whether he was going to be able to raise the ceiling of this team. Now, at the time, the quarterback was Cade McNamara. And I was wondering, like, hey, what's going to happen at the top end? Are they going to go with J.J. McCarthy at some point, who might have a lower floor but clearly a higher ceiling? And guess what we've learned? Now we've learned that J.J. McCarthy has raised his floor to a point where he can go into a location like Iowa City, not turn the ball over, and really play a very efficient and sound game. So now all of a sudden you're getting
Only thing I'm really sure about is Michigan won in the rushing game. 172-35. That's why they won the game. It wasn't because of him. Dude, he had thrown 155 yards and a touchdown. What are you talking about?
The best of what Cade McNamara gave you and the athleticism and top-end ceiling of what J.J. McCarthy can give you. They haven't even scratched the surface of what they can be on offense. Their touchdown to Donovan Edwards in that game, there's a free rusher. Lucas Van Ness from Iowa is just totally free. And he just steps away like it's a normal, Saturday. Hey, I'm just going to step away like it's a scrimmage, like I got a red jersey on and just throw it out there. Now, granted, at Michigan, they probably don't wear a red jersey, probably yellow jersey, but, you get the gist.
Yeah, and like when they played Connecticut, 59-0, which is how you should beat a team, as well as that their quarterback throwed for 17 yards, and McNamara throws for 214. He was 15 for 18. But when we go over here and look, guess what? 200 yards nearly rushing. They throw for 270. Guys, 27 first downs for Michigan against Connecticut. Those type of games. Who is Connecticut? Why are you trying to build these guys up, dude? We've seen what happened last year. It just don't make any sense, the stuff that he's saying. Like, it's just so hard to go on the road, and it's just such a a big deal. And I'm gonna take these things off now. It's just such a big deal to go on the road for everybody else. But and then he can't even back up his own argument to go in and say because Missouri loses the game to K-State, they were on the road. So anyway, that's didn't want to get on here long, about 20 minutes, and just let you catch up some of Klatts stuff. And you can go and watch his other stuff, and go over here and click on the other video. I'm gonna load it up and put it on the other side of here and talk about Georgia game. Me and Dean break it down. I got a clip from that. It's about 10 minutes. Go in there and watch that. Hit that thumbs up button, guys. We appreciate it and we love you, and we'll catch you out through the week. And don't forget, our game of the week, brought to you by Cherokee Eye Clinic, Joe and Harper McKenzie, will be Friday, LD Bruce Field, where they'll be welcoming in Coach O'Brien and the Traveling Conquerors of Coosa Christian. So we'll see you guys out there Friday night. Appreciate it. Thank you.